Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Tech Can Save Us podcast brought to you by Literal Humans. As always, I'm your host, Paul David, founder and CEO of Literal Humans, and I'm joined today by Jari Närhi, CEO of NADMed. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about revolutionizing personalized diagnostics and the impact it has on global health. I'll introduce Jari and talk about NADMed, which is a Finnish health technology company that has developed a breakthrough method for the extraction and measurement of NADs, which are, and you're going to have to help me here, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotides. I'm sure I didn't get all that, but NADs.
I think you got it, yeah. NADs for understandable reasons.
Yeah, so these come from blood samples, which is a critical biomarker for metabolic health, aging, and disease management. Jari is a veteran leader with over 30 years of experience across healthcare technology, information security, and business consulting. He has a versatile global background, having lived and worked across 3 continents, and has held executive roles at organizations like NICU, Capgemini, and Cisco Systems, the small outfits maybe no one's ever heard of, before co-founding NADMed. Very excited to have you on the pod, Jari, and let's jump right in. We like to ask this first question and ask our guests to paint a picture of the landscape. So help us understand why NAD measurement is kind of the next frontier of personalized healthcare, and help us understand, how that, measuring all 4 of the NAD metabolites, why is it so critical for the future of preventative medicine?
Okay, in the wider sense, what's now happening, if we consider the past decade or 2, it's been the age of genomics. And now we say that we're entering the age of metabolism, meaning that there are new technologies, new knowledge that is opening up what really keeps us functioning as humans or any living being on this planet. And that is the metabolism, meaning how do you transfer what you eat into energy and regulate all the processes that are involved in any living being. NADs are fundamental on the cell level metabolism. They are the molecules that are necessary for mitochondria in the cell to produce ATP, which is the energy for the cell, plus they regulate some 300 metabolic processes. They're also involved in DNA repair, fighting inflammation, and a number of other functions as well. And why they are now coming up is that, NADs have been known to science for over a century, but measuring them has been limited to laboratory environment, and only some of the forms have been able to measure or be measured. And now what we have now is technologies that we can measure, as you said, all forms, and we can do it in scale and in any clinical laboratory. So that is a game changer.
Interesting. I'd love to hear kind of 2 things, and they're connected. One is kind of, was there a moment that you and your co-founders realized, like a light bulb moment, hey, there's a need for NADMed to exist and to dive into this area of research. And then also talk to me about the tech. So, the current diagnostic landscape, how it kind of fails patients, and, what has changed and what are you trying to change to kind of fill that gap so that measurement's even possible?
Right. NADMed's origin is in the University of Helsinki in a mitochondrial disease research laboratory, one of the leading institutions in that field. And when you study mitochondria, because of the fundamental nature of NADs, you do want to measure NADs continuously. And that used to be very difficult, partially impossible. The only reliable method was to use mass spectrometry, and that, of course, is a $1 million machine, and it takes days or weeks to get the results, and even then you cannot get measurement on all the metabolites. So a skilled chemist in the team thought that there just simply must be a better way, and she worked on it for a couple of years and came up with the assay that we now have. And at that point, it became immediately obvious that not only all the researchers in the field, but also pharmaceutical companies and eventually clinicians will want to get their hands on this technology. And at that point, the decision to make this a commercial entity and spin it out from the university to make it available to everybody was made. And that's when I joined the team. So I'm not the inventor, but then my task was to prepare the project for spin out and form the company, and then take it from there. So that is really I'm not sure if there's a single light bulb moment, but that is the sequence of events.
Yeah. Would love to You're providing a great segue into the product. So, I want to, have our audience really understand how the NADMed technology simplifies, what used to be, and maybe to some extent still is, complex, clinical diagnostics. You mentioned that they used to require, massive $1 million machines and weeks of waiting. We'd love to understand more about how the team was able to shrink that entire process into a simple kit that any lab can use. And also, you've also changed the ability to provide results in a matter of hours rather than days. So talk to me about how this speed change as well has supported doctors in managing chronic conditions and age-related diseases for their patients.
Yeah, the NADs they're bountiful in our bodies, one of the most numerous molecules in our bodies, but they are hiding inside of cells, inside of multiple layers of different proteins, and especially in blood, then you have hemoglobin and all the rest of it that disturb any attempts to measure them directly where they are. So there's a particular extraction technique that is fundamental to our method. And then once you manage to tease them out from inside the cells so that you can measure them, added complication is that the NADs are very unstable. So you then need to be able to stabilize them quite quickly. And from there on, then the measurement technology is actually something that is quite common in clinical chemistry. So we use certain sets of enzymes to cause a color reaction and then measure the color change, which is fairly mundane and everyday technology for clinics. So essentially, what we do differently is that we make the measurement itself easy, and the steps preceding that are where the magic, if you will.
And getting into a bit more about the product, I'm fascinated by how people package together products and the branding of them. How do you balance kind of the hard science of a laboratory kit that needs to be rigorous and valid in terms of what it produces with the need for kind of a user-friendly experience for clinicians and researchers? Help us understand how you've done that.
Yeah, we actually do not directly deal with the patient. We provide a tool for clinical laboratories. And what we concentrate on is making it easy for the lab to conduct this measurement. So that is our interface. And from there, of course, it is up to the clinic or the doctor to collect the blood samples, and we do provide some advice on that, how that should be done for the samples to be preserved properly. And once the sample is in the laboratory, then it's up to the lab to run our kit or our assay to produce the measurement results.
Got it. We'd love to jump into kind of growth strategy. We're a growth strategy consultancy, and be remiss if we didn't dig into this one.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to understand kind of the biggest challenges and opportunities in terms of scaling a global medtech brand from Finland. I'd first like to kind of ask about, just the broader market. We know that the wellness and longevity market is booming, but it's often crowded by a lot of unverified products. How have you thought to position your brand as a high precision medical tool in a space that's increasingly influenced by consumer wellness trends that aren't quite, what they appear to be?
Yeah, great point. And that is a little bit elaborate at some point, but what we base our love operation on is evidence. So our scientific roots are quite deep, and we want to stay that way. And therefore, we stay away from making any claims that cannot be substantiated, and work quite careful about that in our marketing messaging and everything, so that we do not jump on the wild side, if you will.
And I would love to understand, have you found any, regulatory moats or moats of other types, that you're introducing a completely new, or I understand it as a completely new category of metabolic measurement into the market. What have you found, being first to market, and how have you created, kind of a moat around your product?
Yeah, and there indeed are some, if you will, hindrances in the pathway. For example, in the US with the FDA, typically a new medical device is introduced by what's called the K pathway, which means that then it is compared to an existing device that does more or less the same. But in our case, there is no predicate device. There is nothing in the market that FDA has ever approved for this purpose. So we need to take the longer route, the de novo route for the FDA certification. So that is certainly something that makes it a little bit more elaborate and longer than one would hope for. But of course means that there indeed is nothing in the market that is comparable. The bigger challenge, however, is to educate or rather disseminate the information to the medical community that, first of all, now it is possible to measure NADs. And then once you do that, what do you do with the information? And the latter is really the big challenge because previously measuring NADs, for example, in clinical trials was just about impossible. And therefore, there have been very few, if any, of them before we came around. The medical practices for the use of the for the NAD measurement, of course, are only now just being developed in scale. So that is the big change that we need to help happen in the market. And that, of course, is no small task.
You mentioned like education and building a case for usage. I'm really interested, in terms of what have the sort of other roadblocks been as you're moving from kind of like a clinical research tool to really a standard of care diagnostic. Obviously, huge education challenge for clinicians. What have the other roadblocks been there?
Then I think the need for this measurement is universal. And then, of course, we would need to have universal, global presence all of a sudden, but that, of course, we can't do just on our own. So it is a matter of developing the right partnerships, be they distributors or licensed partners or anything of that kind. And we're only, 4-year-old company, so we're still on the upward slope of development for a number of years to come. So there's quite a few things that need to be executed and done.
Yeah. You mentioned, there's a global need for it. So how have you been thinking about pacing your global expansion? I understand you're looking at North America and the Asian markets. What does that sort of regional geographic growth strategy look like?
In the EU, we have our kit to CE marked. So it is actually the only medical device for the measurement of NADs anywhere with the regulatory approval. So in the Europe, the pathway is a little bit easier because we have a pretty good foothold in some of the large European markets already. Then the US market is something that we're now working on getting the clinical part of that opened. We do have research customers. They came on very early, and also pharma companies as customers, but not yet in the US clinical customers. But that is about to change as we speak. Then next in our sights would be then Southeast Asia, Japan, and then China we need to deal with at some point, but we're not rushing there first.
Yeah, we did some work with a fintech company, helping them, put together their strategy for scaling into India and China, and learned a lot about that market and the sort of the idiosyncrasies and the complications, but also the opportunity. It's obviously a massive market. So good luck to you with that. Would love to talk a bit about, your approach to strategic partnership. We're hearing a lot about partnerships as kind of a key growth lever in 2026. You've obviously got your work with the city of Espoo and Aalto University. What role does partnerships play in your current growth strategy for NADMed?
Critical. And I think the most critical partnerships right now are with the research institutions. Because, as I said earlier, the clinical applications for NAD measurement, somebody will have to not only develop them, but also produce the evidence that, okay, this is now what you need to do with the results as you get them. And that is a massive task. And therefore, we cannot possibly do even a small fraction of that ourselves. We do what we can, but what we can do is then help researchers around the world, predominantly in universities, to conduct research where NAD measurement is needed. And there's, for example, we're just launched a couple of months ago what we call a NADMed award, which is the application period is just closing now, that we provide for the winners or the best applications up to $30,000 worth of either kits or services to support their research projects. So we're doing things like that to help spread the word, if you will.
Absolutely. That's exciting. Would love to talk a bit about capital and funding. I mean, that was obviously a huge factor in any growth strategy. So, you've got, I imagine, a particularly high cost of medical research and development. How do you approach capital efficiency while trying to kind of maintain that fast pace of innovation that's required for kind of launching a new global category? What has that been like for you all?
Good question again. It is a key consideration, of course. We actually are not that capital intensive for a couple of reasons. First of all, one is that we aim to run the big research project, clinical trials, and such with the partners, not ourselves, because we simply are not equipped to do that. And then secondarily, manufacturing, logistics and such. I mean, building a factory is expensive. We don't need to do that. We have outsourced all that to good partners on the manufacturing and logistics side. And therefore, the capital needs are not quite as high as one might expect for a company like us.
Yeah, I love that intersection though of like partnerships as a growth strategy, but also a cost reduction strategy. And if you can align with the needs of a partner like a research institution or a university, then great. It's a win-win-win for all parties. So I really like that. Would love to jump into a bit more about you and your journey. You've worked from IT security to being kind of like a healthcare CEO, and would love to understand some of your learnings about leadership. How do you sort of think about, pulling together all these diverse experiences you've had from Tokyo to Ohio, and what are some of the universal truths and learnings about leadership that you've integrated into building a successful team at NADMed?
Well, people are the same all over. I mean, that's the number one. We are actually quite alike. And in terms of leadership or working with people, I think it comes to honesty, trust, and respect. And that is universally applicable. How that manifests itself or these things manifest in different cultures, of course, varies quite a bit. But I think as fundamentals, so those are the things that I try to stick to all the time. And I think it works.
Yeah, sounds like it has. And I'm curious about it because I've been on boards before. It seems like you've had roles on boards as well for various companies. How do you sort of understand that sort of the difference and the shift between that kind of high level governance and the boots on the ground reality of being a startup CEO? How do you toggle between the two?
It's just a change of mindset and pace. And I think it's quite refreshing to every once in a while change the viewpoint, and it kind of maybe adds to your understanding of the entirety of the running a business, and gives you an appreciation of the different challenges on different situations and different levels. So I find it's enriching.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too, you've got this foundation in information technology. So I'd be curious like how that sort of, foundation that you build in IT has kind of shaped your approach to running a med tech, health tech company.
First of all, I'm not really a techie, nor am I a researcher.
Gotcha.
But working with smart people around you, be they doctors, researchers, or smart IT people, I think that's quite similar, actually. Again, comes back to what we already discussed. Don't find the different industries that different.
Yeah.
Of course, the substance is very different, but then again, in my case, it's usually other people who worry about the substance, not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're touching on something interesting. Like we tend to maybe overstate the differences and we forget about the fundamentals, and maybe we kind of underserve the fundamentals because we're so, we overly complexify things. So I appreciate that you have the through line of, look, it's about honesty, it's about trust, it's about respect. Get those right and the rest will follow.
Yeah, and of course you have to recognize that there are different specialties and different skills that are needed, but you don't need to, and you cannot carry all of them with you.
Yeah, of course. So now we'll jump into the quick fire kind of lightning round. Just a couple quick questions, kind of fun, interesting to get to know you a bit more personally. The first is about being a startup entrepreneur, being a founder. We find that a lot of entrepreneurs have so many ideas spilling out of them. Let's say you finish with NADMed, you solve, the NAD, a metabolic analysis, issue. Then you jump to something else. What would you start? What's your next tech startup would be and why?
Oh, wow. Haven't given that much thought.
First thing that comes to mind. That's
But
the lightning
just
round.
shooting
Yeah.
from the hip
Yeah.
probably would be something around personal health and
Mhm.
how do you automate that or scale it up with the help of the current IT tools, be it AI or something else,
Yeah.
something in that space.
I think that's a great one. I'm always wondering, like another Finnish company, Aura, they used to be a client of ours actually. Why isn't my Aura ring talking to my GP, talking to my, my trainer at the gym, and kind of why are they all connected? But yeah, that's
Yeah, I think it will
yeah,
not too distant future.
eventually, yeah. Two questions about tech inventions. So what's a tech invention that currently makes you the most excited, and a tech invention that makes you the most concerned or scared?
I think it's the continuum of the inventions. I mean, if you in
Mm,
IT side, if you start from the transistor to microprocessor and everything that they enable, such as internet, wide web, and what builds on that, I think it is the continuum that is really exciting. Can't pinpoint any single one, and likewise in the medical sciences, antibiotics or decoding the human genome. I mean, these all play into the whole. What then concerns me maybe the most now is what the social media and the algorithms do to young people as they grow up.
yeah.
And I think that is a legitimate concern that we should be paying a whole lot more attention to that. When your brain is forming, that is that forming in the company of an algorithm on the web or mobile phone or with real people. And I think
Yeah.
that is actually quite scary.
It's really well said, and you're seeing kind of obviously the backlash or the treatment of that in different governments, sort of making bans. It's actually shocking when you put it the way you do, because it's sort of like, what have we given young people in terms of like, it's almost like we've given them a poison or a drug of some sort that like has really hurt them, which is quite shocking. Would love to hear about a literal human who has been integral to your career journey, who's someone that you want to shout out.
Can't point to any single one, but starting from my parents to former and current colleagues and bosses, I think there's a whole multitude of people that have been formative, and appreciate all of them.
Of course, of course. And then, is there any sort of inspirational quote or saying that has kind of stuck with you in your journey in tech?
Maybe more in the way of a guidance. Something that stuck with me a long time ago is that if you can work with and hire people who are smarter than you are, and of course, I mean, it's not an end to itself, but I think as a principle that there's lots of people out there that you can learn from. So
Yeah.
seek their company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate that. Well, listen, I've loved this episode, Jari, because I think the work you do at NADMed demonstrates that, precision diagnostics can kind of move us away from like a one size fits all, or not really even serving the health journeys of folks, to more truly personalized health insights. And that's really exciting. And it's so incredible you've created this new category, this new product that didn't even exist before, that's going to, mean a lot of better, healthier days for a lot of people. So kudos to you for doing that. And thank you for joining us. Please let our listeners know, where can they find out more about you and your work at NADMed?
I think just head to our webpage, www.nadmed.com. I think that is the best single source, and there's multiple rabbit holes that you can get into there.
Gotcha. Sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing education for clinicians, so feel free to jump into that and folks can learn a lot more. We'll include that in the episode description. And please, as always, please leave a review, give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed the episode. It really helps us bring on amazing CEOs like Jari Närhi, who's the CEO of NADMed, onto the show. This has been another great episode of Tech Can't Save Us podcast, brought to you by Literal Humans. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Jari, for joining the show.
Thank you.